And we're back for another interview at the Staking Summit 2025 here in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Joining me now is Oisin, CTO and co-founder for Obol.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for joining us. It's really good that you're here to speak about Obol and what you've been doing. And so I guess this is where we'll start. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a rundown of what Obol has been doing since whenever you were founded, and yeah, what's your role within.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me. This is my third staking summit, and I'm pretty glad to be back. Obol got started in mid 2021, so we're 4 years or so on the go. We build distributed validators, is kind of what most people know us for. For those that don't know, that's an Ethereum validator that runs like a multi-sig. Maybe you only have 4 computers, but only 3 of them need to be online and working. And beyond that, we're now kind of building on more of the stack. We're helping people to run nodes for more than just validators, be it layer 2s, be it AVSs, things like that. And yeah, at the moment, about 2% of the network is running on DVs, and we have a few hundred of the node operators. We run in all of the major staking protocols, and we also have a node operator company ourselves, and that runs in EtherFi, Lido, and Swell at this point.
All right, amazing. Thanks for that. I know you just had a keynote back then. Maybe you could give us a little bit of a rundown of what you spoke about on it.
Absolutely, I'm delighted to. So this year in Ethereum staking is a year quite different to the 4 that came before it, insofar as that this is the first time that we've had staking ETFs approved, and we have these digital asset treasury companies that everyone's talking about. And how I kind of put it is that the sophistication of people that are allocating their ETH has gone up tremendously versus the early years. In the early years, it was like, degens, ETH maxis, people that were like, quite happy to like throw it in wherever. Whereas now you have these very sophisticated people running, billions of dollars of capital on behalf of kind of clients in public vehicles and, regulated like ETFs. So these operators are much more risk focused than what came before. They're not looking at the yield, they're looking at the risk-adjusted yield. And they're looking at things that we saw this year, for example, where one developer clicked one bad link, lost his GitHub token, something like $30 or $40 million of Solana was stolen, 2.8 million Ether, so about $10 billion worth of Ether, had to get emergency exits. And this resulted in the people that were using that stake not losing any money, so that's very good, and they're very happy about that, but still lost out on, 30 or 40% of their APR for the year. And that was the best case scenario. So a lot of these people all of a sudden are now like, we don't want to have, our clients' money exposed to some human run by some operator a good chunk of distance from us. We would like to, reduce our risk and our risk exposure. And that's where DVs really shine. Instead of putting your stake onto one company, you're putting it onto usually 4. And if, at least 3 of them are online working, your validator is online, and it would take 3 out of 4 to be hacked or compromised to be getting into like a scary situation. So it's much more secure in that regard. It's much like, more resilient when it comes to client failures, things like that. And that's kind of the main crux of the talk and where it was focused. And one of the kind of big tidbits that I kind of announced is we are working to reduce kind of every single point of failure, and one of them so far has been the client that we have built ourselves called Kyne. That is the brains behind the operation that makes a validator into a distributed validator. And today we got to announce for the very first time that we released a distributed validator specification. This is like the Ethereum execution specification, the consensus specification. Now we have a distributed validator specification. And we're also able to announce that our friends and partners at Nethermind are building a client called Pluto. And that will be the second Ethereum distributed validator client that will interoperate with Charon. So then if you are running, billions of dollars on a distributed validator and God forbid something happens to Charon, you have another one on your stack. Maybe you go, add a few more there and you're back online and running. And our goal really is to get to 4 implementations, because then you can have 4 different computers, no common piece of software on any of them. So anything goes wrong, you stay online, you keep earning your rewards. And that's kind of the gold standard and what we're working towards.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That it seems that conversation is much more about risk assessment than actually rewards, because I guess everyone's also streamlined the validator process. So there's not much difference, right? The rewards are there.
Yeah.
Give or take a couple of decimal points, right? So now it's much more about safety, right? Especially for, as you said, like these guys are running billions of dollars. Like they don't care if it's like 3.2 or 3.3, right? They care that it's 3.2 and your funds are safe, right?
For sure.
So this is interesting because it's something we're all also discussing. Like how do we help assessing this risk, right? So
Yeah.
it's very important, and I believe that what you're doing is
Yeah. How I frame it is that the risks at this point are far larger than the rewards. If you do everything right, you get 2.8% per year. If you do everything wrong, you lose it all. So this is why, yeah, these kind of characters, and it is specifically like a type of character. Like when you run a public company, when you run like a regulated fund, you do have to think of it. You have to like, submit to the SEC like what you're doing. You're like, taking best practices and stuff. You don't want like, to be people coming looking later and said you did what with customer funds.
yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the big change that I've noticed this year and like kind of in the industry more generally.
Yeah, it's a different level right now. As you said before, with degens, people running, routers and their basement, which was very important, very fun, I guess, for a lot of the people. But now we're talking about something very, very different and yeah, with different ramifications for everyone involved. So it's good that we are maturing as an industry and bringing these layers of security, of course. So other than this multi-client announcement that you had, what else is Obol working on at the moment?
Yeah. So the next big thing that we're also announcing later this week that I will give some early alpha to people watching the podcast is we're expanding beyond just the focus on validators. Generally, our experience over the years is we see people that have set up their staking system and it's making them some amount of money, but they're often trying to figure out like how can I add more, like what other services can I run, can I make any additional bit of revenue? And one of the things that often comes to pass is there's quite a high friction to adding some extra piece of equipment. It's like not so easy to say, oh yeah, I'll run that L2, I'll run that AVS. Like the market is still pretty early. And we even noticed it when it comes to distributed validators. People would like to join extra clusters and they want to add more things. So what we're building is what we call the Obol stack. It is a Kubernetes-based system to run an Ethereum full node. And when you have Kubernetes and you have this like package manager called Helm, you can bundle up extra software into like an easy install. And the idea is like one line install, you can add another thing to your stack. So you can add a distributed validator in one line, you can add a layer 2, you can add an AVS. And the goal is to reduce the friction for running decentralized software. And the goal is if you can reduce the friction for the application developers and the node operators, you get more economic activity happening.
And so it's kind of modular. You can just stack whatever you want and then remove with this and put that. Oh,
Exactly.
nice.
One example I'll give you is that we're working with the Aztec team. Aztec, for those that don't know, is a privacy-focused layer 2. They have a big incentive to have a huge amount of nodes in their system, particularly sequencer nodes. And they're like, how do we distribute sequencers? How do we get people running them? How do we make it easy for validators to add sequence to the stack? So the goal is that you can add an Aztec sequencer to the stack in basically one command, and eventually even an AI agent will help you run it.
Yeah, removing the friction altogether. Yeah, great stuff, man. Thanks a lot for those insights. So I've been doing this with all our guests to wrap the interview, giving us like a higher perspective that from you on what's next for staking. So where do you believe we are going as an industry in the staking ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting and contentious view, depending on, to be honest, how much like of an Ethereum maxi you are. We've seen a lot of the new corporate competitor chains announced. You have the Arcs, the Plasmas, the Tempos coming along, and Ethereum is trying to figure out, where does it fit in a world of maybe more centralized competitors. And to that end, my bias, of course, is that Ethereum should double down on its strength, namely that it's extremely decentralized and far more so than any competitor. We've seen a lot of consolidation in the Ethereum staking space, particularly rewards are lower. There was threats of them, being cut to kind of zero. We've seen a lot of node operators exit the market. We've seen a lot of liquid staking tokens like go down only since. I think Ethereum needs to kind of reckon with its strategy and decide, like, are we going to be the highly decentralized layer 1 that's, an order of magnitude more than everyone else? Or are we going to be the low gas, low throughput corporate chain that, Tempo and other things would be able to, like, beat us on? This is, I think, the kind of existential challenge that Ethereum is kind of faced with. And in my eyes, I think the kind of maxi ideologues will win out, that Ethereum's roots are in decentralization. So I'm not crazy worried, but there is certainly camps where people are like, who needs 10,000 validators? Let's just have, the top 20 node operators run the whole stake and it'll be fine. And others are like, no, no, we need distributed validators. We need like solo stakers. We need like community all over the world to be like running nodes. And that's the side that I'm hoping will win out. I'm hoping a year from now, you know, Ethereum is more decentralized than it is today, which is maybe more centralized than it's been in the 4 previous years that I've seen it.
And how do you feel the balance is at the moment?
I think we overcorrected a little bit too hard in the last year when the EF did a kind of a bit of a reorganization and they focused on increasing execution, increasing blobs, and like improving UX. I think we cannot sacrifice decentralization or we won't have, the golden goose or something. So I am hoping that people will start to look at the data, look at, it costs twice as much to solo stake than it does to stake in Lido. It, costs more and more every year to be a node operator. The amount of node operators are going down. There's consolidation everywhere. I think sooner or later, Ethereum leadership will have to kind of go, oh, this isn't the trajectory we want to be on. Let's try and tilt this. A couple of EIPs that go a long way, correlation penalties for like correlated outages, trying to improve native staking versus the kind of wrapping products that are above it. And I do think it will have to come from some level of EF leadership that they say, oh, we can't forget about decentralization. But I do expect that to come because I do think most of leadership is still an ideology at Maxi at heart. So I'm not particularly worried, but that is what I hope to see, call it this time next year.
All right, thanks. Great answer. And thanks a lot for this interview. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I don't know if you have any last comments that you want to share with someone.
Nothing too major. I think you can find out more about Obol on X at Obol_collective. You can go to obol.org. That'll be kind of a good jumping off point. You can read about DVs. You can read about the stack. You can read about all the good things they're working on. You can find me at Kyne on Twitter, so you can figure out how to spell that. But generally speaking, thank you.
We'll put it down. All right, Oisin. Thanks a lot again, and see you guys next time.